Welcome to Into the Paradox, the podcast where we delve into the unexplored and the unconventional. I'm your host, Peter Kennedy, and joining me today is Tom, our resident crime and occult specialist. Tom, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be here.
Today we're going to explore a fascinating and somewhat disturbing topic. With the rise of AI and robotics, there's a growing concern that humans will become less employable. This could potentially lead to a surge in crime rates. Tom, can you give us some insight into this phenomenon?
Yes, Peter. The automation of jobs is a reality we're already facing. As AI and robotics become more advanced, they're taking over tasks that were previously done by humans. This is going to lead to a significant displacement of workers, particularly in industries where tasks are repetitive or can be easily automated. The consequences of this are twofold. On one hand, you have people who are no longer able to support themselves and their families, which can lead to desperation and, in some cases, crime. On the other hand, you have a growing wealth gap, where those who own the machines and the technology are getting richer, while those who don't are being left behind.
That's a very bleak picture, Tom. But what's the connection between this and the legalization and regulation of all drugs and medications?
Well, Peter, the idea is that if people are no longer able to support themselves through traditional means, they may turn to alternative methods, such as crime or the black market. By legalizing and regulating all drugs and medications, you're essentially taking away the profit motive from the criminal underworld. If people can access the substances they need or want through legitimate channels, they're less likely to turn to crime to get them. Additionally, the tax revenue generated from the sale of these substances could be used to support social programs and services that help people who are struggling to adapt to the new economic reality.
That's an interesting argument, Tom. But wouldn't legalizing all drugs and medications lead to a surge in addiction and social problems?
Not necessarily, Peter. If done correctly, legalization and regulation can actually lead to a reduction in addiction and social problems. By providing a safe and controlled environment for people to access substances, you can reduce the risk of overdose, contamination, and other harms associated with the black market. Additionally, the revenue generated from taxation can be used to fund education, treatment, and support services for those who are struggling with addiction. It's not a panacea, but it's a more nuanced and evidence-based approach than the failed war on drugs.
I see your point, Tom. But what about the potential risks and unintended consequences of such a policy? How do we ensure that legalization and regulation don't lead to a free-for-all, where anyone can access any substance they want, regardless of the risks?
That's a valid concern, Peter. Any policy of legalization and regulation would need to be carefully crafted and implemented. You would need to establish strict guidelines and regulations around who can access which substances and under what circumstances. You would also need to invest in education and public health campaigns to raise awareness about the risks and benefits of different substances. And of course, you would need to ensure that the tax revenue generated is used to support social programs and services that help people who are struggling with addiction or other related issues.
Tom, you've given us a lot to think about today. As we move forward into this brave new world of automation and artificial intelligence, it's clear that we need to be thinking outside the box and exploring new solutions to the challenges that lie ahead. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
You know, Tom, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here. When we talk about AI and job displacement, it's not just about factory workers anymore, is it? We're seeing accountants, lawyers, even creative fields being impacted. What's the real scope of this, in your opinion?
Absolutely, Peter. It's much broader than people initially assume. We're talking about a significant portion of the workforce being disrupted. AI isn't just automating physical labor, it's automating cognitive tasks. Data entry, customer service, even diagnosis in some medical fields are ripe for automation. Think about something like truck driving. Autonomous vehicles could displace millions. This isn't some distant future, it's happening now, and the speed at which it's evolving is dizzying.
So, if these jobs are gone and new ones aren't being created at the same pace or require vastly different skills, what happens to the human spirit? Beyond just the economic hardship, there's a sense of purpose, of identity tied to work, isn't there?
That's a crucial point, Peter. Losing your livelihood isn't just about losing income, it's a loss of self-worth for many. It can lead to profound psychological distress, depression, anxiety, a feeling of being obsolete. When you feel you have no value to society, that's incredibly damaging. And historically, when large segments of a population feel disenfranchised and hopeless, social unrest and, yes, crime rates tend to climb. Desperation breeds desperate measures.
Which brings us back to this rather unconventional solution. You mentioned taking the profit motive out of the black market for drugs. Can you elaborate on how a regulated market would actually function, especially for substances considered highly dangerous, like, say, opioids or even stimulants?
Right, it's not about a free for all. Think of it more like a public health model. For substances like opioids, you wouldn't just have them on shelves at a corner store. Access would be tightly controlled, likely through a medical prescription model, much like it is for many medications now, but without the black market alternative. For less harmful substances like cannabis, you might see something closer to alcohol regulation, licensed dispensaries, age restrictions, purity testing, clear dosage information. The goal is transparency, safety, and control. It's about recognizing that prohibition doesn't stop use, it just makes it dangerous and profitable for criminals.
So, instead of pushing people to clandestine dealers for unknown substances, they'd have safe, tested products, and the government would collect taxes. But what about the argument that this just normalizes drug use and encourages people who wouldn't otherwise try them?
That's a common fear, Peter, but evidence from places that have moved towards decriminalization or legalization doesn't necessarily support it. Portugal, for example, decriminalized all drugs in 2001. They didn't see a spike in usage. In fact, drug-related deaths, HIV infections, and crime rates all decreased. Their approach shifted from criminalizing users to treating addiction as a health issue, offering support and treatment instead of jail time. Education plays a huge role. If substances are legal, you can have open, honest conversations about their risks and benefits in public health campaigns rather than fear-mongering that often backfires.
That's a powerful example. So, if we embrace this model, how does the revenue generated directly combat the issues of AI-driven joblessness? I mean, we're talking about potentially billions in tax revenue. What could that fund?
The potential is enormous. First, retraining programs. As jobs disappear, we need robust, accessible pathways for people to acquire new skills. This revenue could fund free or heavily subsidized education in emerging fields. Second, and this is crucial, universal basic income or UBI. If a significant portion of the population is unemployable by traditional metrics, a UBI could provide a safety net, ensuring everyone has their basic needs met. This would dramatically reduce desperation and consequently the crime that stems from it. Third, mental health services. As we discussed, job loss impacts mental health. This revenue could fund expanded access to therapy, counseling, and support groups, helping people navigate these incredibly challenging transitions.
So, it's not just about stopping crime, but about building a new social contract, a new safety net, for a future where traditional employment might not be the norm for everyone. It almost sounds utopian, but the practical challenges must be immense. How do you get public buy-in for something so radical, Tom?
That's the million-dollar question, Peter. It requires a massive shift in public perception, moving away from moralistic judgments about drug use and towards a pragmatic, evidence-based public health approach. It also requires political courage. But the alternative, a society with widespread joblessness, increasing wealth disparity, and a booming black market fueling crime, that's a dystopian vision that should motivate us to consider even radical solutions. The war on drugs has demonstrably failed. It's filled prisons, torn families apart, and empowered criminal organizations, all while doing little to curb addiction. A new approach is not just an option, it's becoming a necessity.
And the police, for example, would have a completely different role, wouldn't they? Instead of fighting a losing battle against drug trafficking, their resources could be redirected to more impactful areas, perhaps even community support.
Exactly. Think of the law enforcement resources currently dedicated to drug-related offences, arrests, prosecutions, incarceration. That's a massive drain on budgets and personnel. If drugs are regulated, those resources could be reallocated to investigating serious violent crimes, fraud, or even community policing initiatives. It would free up the justice system to focus on true threats to public safety rather than victimless crimes or public health issues. It's a more efficient and humane use of our collective resources.
This really forces us to redefine what crime even means in this future, doesn't it? If desperation is a primary driver, and we address that desperation through economic means and public health, then the very nature of low-level crime could fundamentally change. What about the global implications, Tom? If one country adopts this but others don't, does that create new problems?
It certainly creates challenges. We've seen this with cannabis legalization in various states and countries. It can lead to cross-border issues, smuggling from unregulated markets into regulated ones, or vice versa. Ideally, it would be a coordinated international effort, but that's a long shot. More realistically, early adopters would need robust border controls and international cooperation agreements to manage the transition. But the benefits of domestic reform, especially for funding a post-automation society, might outweigh these cross-border complexities.
So it's about weighing the risks of a radical solution against the even greater risks of doing nothing. The status quo in the face of rapidly advancing AI seems increasingly unsustainable. It makes you wonder, If we don't adapt our social and economic structures, what kind of world are we truly building for ourselves?
Precisely, Peter. It's a paradox, isn't it? The very technology designed to improve our lives could also dismantle the foundational structures of our society. We have to be proactive, to think creatively about how we manage this transition. Ignoring the problem or clinging to outdated policies will only lead to more suffering, more inequality, and ultimately more social instability. This conversation isn't just about drugs, it's about the future of human dignity and societal resilience in the age of intelligent machines.
It really is a profound challenge, and your insights, Tom, have been invaluable in helping us navigate these complex waters. It's clear we can't afford to be complacent. We need bold thinking and a willingness to explore uncomfortable truths. Thank you so much for breaking down such a multifaceted and frankly daring perspective for our listeners today.
My pleasure, Peter. It's a conversation that needs to happen, and I appreciate you giving it the platform it deserves.
And that's all for today's episode of Into the Paradox. This topic, I guarantee, will spark many conversations. We encourage you, our listeners, to think critically about the implications of AI on our society and what innovative solutions might be needed. If you want to delve deeper into these subjects, check out some of the resources linked in our show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one, where we continue to explore the edges of human understanding.